Um, so the process is we're just really at the very beginning here. We're kind of in this just finishing up our phase one, and that phase one really has been a gathering of information. So we on the technical side, we've been doing what's called a vulnerability assessment, which is looking at what are the assets that are along the coastline that are important to protect, and what are the different coastal hazards that are impacting those assets and how vulnerable that are they to the different sea level rises, to erosion, to storms, landslides, and so forth. So that's really what we're gathering together now, and we'll have available to the public soon. But we're also been listening to community members. We've done listening sessions with all sorts of different groups. This one is for the general public. We have had individual stakeholder interviews with supervisors and other key people. We've developed a website and are in the process of doing something called a story map that will be available soon, that will also be available for all of you to read and take a look at all the details. And this is us moving now into phase two, which is creating a vision so that we all can align around what we want the coast to actually look like, because that's going to help us as we're thinking about what are the solutions we should be exploring. And then we're doing an economic assessment of all these different damages and concerns on those assets and so forth. Then we're also moving forward after that into developing those adaptation pathways that I mentioned. What are the ways we're going to adapt to all these changes? What are the different solution sets that we'll be creating? And those will be developed not just along the coast, but at different neighborhood sections, because we recognize they're very different from one section to the other. We'll have continued engagement across all of these things. And then finally, we'll have our local coastal program amendment. And this is a multiple year process. So this will all be going into 2026. So it'll be happening a lot. We'll be doing in-person activities over this time, as well as continuing these kind of listening sessions. Okay, so who is affected? What is the plan covering? So you can see the sort of the blue watercolor, which is a little bit confusing here, but that is where the local coastal program is really focusing. And you can see there's sort of an empty spot here because it does not include the city of Santa Cruz, the city of Capitola, or the city of Watsonville. It really is along the coast here. So that's something to think about. Those other jurisdictions are doing different work. Hopefully we're collaborating, which we are. We're talking to them. We're talking to state parks, all the other jurisdictions who are doing this kind of work. We're keeping in mind. So just going to give a little overview of what we're doing on that vulnerability assessment. So a couple of the things that were being evaluated is land use and structure. So what are the different buildings, residents, hotels, farms, and critical facilities that we need to consider? The utilities and the infrastructure, wastewater, stormwater, gas lines, we need to look at. Recreation and coastal access. Access is a huge issue, concern. Lots of people are trying to get to the beach, get to the water. So looking at those, and bike trails, as well as restrooms and all those other amenities that are part of that. Transportation, of course, is another piece of the infrastructure puzzle. Thinking about roads, rails, bridges, bus lines, how people get around, get to it and from it. And then all the natural resources, our dunes, the beaches, the cliff sides. We're looking at all of those elements. And we're also thinking about demographics, people who are vulnerable from a social perspective, like if they are seniors, they're living alone, may have a disability, all of those different elements, visitation, tourism, as well as coastal armoring and what are those impacts. And there's a lot of different elements around coastal arming that we need to consider. There's some that are old and have not been updated and different permitting concerns. So that's a big one. So what are the different hazard types that we're assessing? So there's 4 major ones that are on top of mind. One is storm, wave, and flooding. So we have big storms. What's happening after those? They're impacting us. We have overall rising tides. So obviously a king tide is very much an issue, and just overall rising sea levels. Coastal erosion is happening sort of right at the cliffside, but as you see in this picture here, also onto our roadways, it's very impacted. And then fluvial flooding, so things that are coming off the rivers and other lagoons and everything else from the uplands area to the ocean is part of our evaluation too. So what are we seeing right now? So there's a couple key things that we know that storm wave events are driving coastal erosion, and it's going to continue to accelerate with sea level rise. It happens right now already in low-lying areas, and it's going to help continue to have the depth and frequency will increase over time. As of 2017, we know there's about 1,800 residential properties that are vulnerable to these different hazards. And we know that many of the county's coastal bluffs have already been eroding and are impacted. And about 5 feet of sea level rises, and that's a fairly substantial, that many of the beaches, including Seacliff, Aptos, and Menrays, may be underwater during high tide. So this is a real current and happening effort. So in terms of like, what are we basing our science on? This is one of the different changes that we're doing is we're looking at, there's some uncertainty. Obviously, we don't know what that is, but the state recommends evaluating at an intermediate high sea level rise scenario for all of our efforts. And so you can see here in the purple area that this is what we're planning for. So there's a high level that goes all the way up to this line. You can see where sea level rise might grow higher. This dotted line is what was considered in 2018 as a very high. And then you can see that some of the lower estimates are just below that. So this purple one is kind of a in-between high level. And so it really increases, and you can see in 2100, there's where you're seeing a lot of those changes. So that is sort of the baseline of what we're planning for, is that purple line. Okay, so that was a lot of discussion, and I am seeing, let's see, one question in the thing. Who decides to use intermediate height? So I think that is based on the state's recommendation is what that is happening. So we're just following best practices on that. And please feel free as we're going, what if the public does not agree with intermediate high level? I think that we're following the state's guidelines on this. So that is, you know, I think that's basically the baseline. The state, yes, it is the state. It's funny when I'm talking to a line on things, I feel like I should see your face. So sorry, I can't see who you are. I'd love to see face first. But yes, we're looking at what the state is doing and following their lead. So we are consistent, and that is a supportive us. By the state, I'm talking about the state of California and the way that they've set this up. So I'm sure it is part of the Coastal Commission, but it's also what the state of California and the ongoing state estimates on sea level rise are also helping with us. David, if I'm wrong on that, please correct me, but we can also provide that in more detail. So I'm going to move us forward. I'm just take it to a couple of questions. So I want to go back to the Mentimeter and ask a couple questions, and we're going to have, so these are just sort of an easy one for you guys to have some response on in terms of I'm concerned or very not concerned. We're going to also have an open-ended answer in a second. So this is like, so we can have a very kind of common answer, but then you're going to also be able to write out your own concerns here in a second. Alicia just put the link back in. If you were on Mentimeter before, it should still be there. So you should be able to see that on your device, whichever one you're choosing to use. So I will give folks a second. There we go. So the different options here, and obviously we know there's lots of things that people are concerned about, but the public infrastructure and facilities, natural beauty, access, damage to private property, damage to the natural environment, and the economy are all sort of areas that we've heard concerns for so far. And so just kind of judging here on this group, what that looks like. And I'll give people a moment to answer these questions as we're going through it. I like Mentimeter because you can kind of see these lines going back and forth as people are considering and thinking about things. So it seems like we're pretty concerned about all of these different elements. Maybe the economy is less. Yeah, and the economy is sort of a funny one, but because it's tourism and it's the businesses and so forth like that that are sort of supported by sort of our incredible beauty. Um, so they kind of all go hand in hand together here. I'm going to give folks just a minute more to see. We have about 34 attendees here, so give a couple more minutes. I have about 20 of you who've answered. Access, yeah, I think access seems to be the one that's really coming out on top here. People have really talked about that with us. Access is such a concern, and maintaining that in a quality way. So not just I talked to somebody who grew up in Santa Cruz, and in the when they were kids they had to kind of scramble down the rocks, and that's not a great thing for somebody who's in their 50s. They'd much rather have a nice set of stairs and easy access, and that's really what we want, is access for everybody, not just the rough and tumble teenager who is going off to go surfing. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next one. You can feel free to keep answering here, but this is an opportunity you guys can start writing sort of what is your greatest concern here? Like, what are the things that really are bothering you? And you can feel free, and I think, Alicia, we can have multiple answers on this one. I can't remember, but you should be able to do a couple of answers here and write these out, because I know that you guys have concerns. So let's go ahead and start with this piece. And I'm going to give you guys I'll chatter on here and give you guys plenty of time to answer here. And I think, as you're thinking it, anything that's specific that you want to really highlight, love to hear it. Because, this is all going into sort of an overall mix of helping us understand things. So property rights and protection of property loss and value. So loss of private property rights, that's a lot of them. Local loss of coastal space for gathering for communities. I'm assuming it's for gathering in general. There's loss of beaches, surfing and high tide. That the LCP is limiting the right of private property owners to protect their private property at their own expense. So lots of concerns on private property and loss of habitat, pollution along the shoreline, seawall and property safety. We're not doing nearly enough to mitigate climate change by drastically reducing emissions. Yep, I hear you on that. So big concerns on private property rights, and thinking about how that works. And I think early on we were talking about, how do we balance all these things? And I think that's the real question as we go forward. Like, how do we balance, from the habitat to the sea to the access and the private property rights, and creating a really positive environment for all that things to happen. So I feel like that's an important piece for everybody. Moderate triggered based approach to adaptation strategies to address sea level rise. So that's kind of the adaptation pathways we were mentioning. Public access should take priority over private interest. Wealth should not determine coastal access. Armoring versus nature-based solutions. And that's interesting. So I'm kind of curious on that one, and you might add to it or drop in is there one better than the other, or is just the idea that we should be balancing those? Love to hear that. More information. Lack of the coastal commission's understanding that different locations have different risks. And, we're hoping in the local coastal plan to really think about it by neighborhood and really think about it, and then do that. So hopefully the county can address a little bit of that. The government the government will not use the best realistic outlook on sea level rise, and rather use manipulated science to fit the desired outcome. So that's a sort of a data question. And I think one of the things that the adaptation pathway helps with, and I think because data is really challenging because it's uncertain, right? And so the adaptation pathways helps us a little mitigate that concern because what we're saying is when an activity happens, that's when the trigger is versus saying there is this date certain that these things have to happen. And I think that's a way for us to have a more positive conversation is talking about those triggers. Love to hear more from folks here on the phone and see if that makes sense. But that's one of the things that I think helps is doing that adaptation pathway approach is the sea level rise limits are less of a concern and it's more about what has happened, where has something happened on the trigger or so forth. So that helps. Okay. And then one solution does not work for all. That's another good point on that. Great. Thank you all. So I'm going to go and click onto my next slide and then kind of go on the positive side here about opportunities, because we have to do work. We're going to be doing things on the coastline. So what can we do? What should we be doing? And so similarly, we'll have an open-ended question after this. And but this is to sort of give us, again, a common understanding. And then while that's happening, there is I'm looking at a note here. Will you be able to see who submitted responses? No, I do not. And I think from what I'm seeing, everyone has just had one opportunity for those responses. So we're getting responses from folks across the answer. So that's that one answer to the first question there. And then regarding Beach Drive and Aptos, during the storms, the county will clear the sand from the road and dump it over the railing to the beach, which makes a ramp for the waves to come over the road and not let the seawall do its work. Then state parks will not allow the county to clear the buildup of sand along the seawall and can do its job. Okay, so that seems like an important piece. What is meant by sustained maintenance? So we heard a lot about just being able to maintain things, be whatever it is on the coastline. How do we maintain it? Be it stairs for access, to seawalls, to plantings that maintains just maintaining things and having funds available for ongoing maintenance is what that means. So hopefully that helps. I like the questions. Keep them coming. Very helpful to hear what everyone's thinking on this. So let's see, what are we concerned about? So maintenance does seem to be a concern. And I have a feeling that there's folks have different ideas of what maintenance they're thinking about, but maintenance is something that, everyone is always worried about. Environmental restoration is a great opportunity here as we're doing this, increasing access, a little less. So, not worry too much about enhancing tourism here, but protecting the coast is an important. Does enhanced tourism mean responsible tourism? Well, we always hope, Richard. I don't know. Tourism is tourism, and as much as we can get that responsible tourism is a good point. But yeah, I think that's a good question. I wish I could answer that. I don't know if anybody can. I see, nature-based ecotourism. I think that's an opportunity. So maybe that is a way of thinking about it is how do you enhance using this process as a way to say, we want folks to come here to do bird watching or to do, more, as you said, eco-tourist, nature-based oriented tourism, and really say that that's what the special sauce is in Santa Cruz. So I think that's a great one. And when we talk about the vision, maybe that's something you might offer into that question. Okay, so I'm going to move us to sort of opportunities, other things that we might consider here on opportunities. Same deal. And some of the things, and I'm kind of curious, some of the things I've heard and on the concern side, there was a lot of concern about private property and that it's sort of like it seems like it's an either or. And a couple of people I've talked to have really raised up the idea of being able to compromise, or like how do we work together to co-benefit public access, recreation, economic and environmental support of the coastline. So, and anybody has any thoughts there, I'd love to hear that if there's something that makes sense for them. Let's see, less traffic along the coast. Different science opinions should be considered regarding sea level rise. Constitutionally protected property rights. Educating people on climate acceleration and solutions. Getting the Coastal Commission out of permitting processes. The county approves a permit in the Coastal Commission then rejects it after years and a lot of expense. ADA compliant access and infrastructure, increasing public transportation along the touristy areas as mitigation equity strategy, allowing private properties owners to protect their property. Oh, Mike, can you see the screen? That's where I'm looking at right now. I'm just reading them out so people who might be typing might not hear it. So they should be on the screen, and everybody will get a copy of this. We'll share them out. They're not precious. We all want to hear this language. Climate change education, coastal armoring that provides greater public access. Maybe we should close a lithium power plant to protect environment and people. And then transfer development rights, rolling easements, buyouts, or conservation easements, different incentives for elevating or relocating homes. So kind of a slew of different questions. Mike, maybe you started a little late. This is through Mentimeter. Alicia, do you want to just share that? We're all on a real-time little survey thing right now. So the link at the top you see on the screen, it says menti.com. You can go in and use that code and you can join in on the fun here. Say property buyouts is another opportunity. Setting fines for those who continue to develop too close to coastal flooding areas. Regulation, coastal homes should be primary residence or tax balance the direct and indirect costs they create. Buy out empty coastal homes and restored to nature and public access. The greatest factor affecting future climate change is human activity. How do we impact that? Good question. Ecological restoration, nature-based solutions, and embracing the Coastal Act protections for public resources. Recognizing that longer time projections are inexact and need to be frequently revised. Is the state going to take control of what private property owners can do with their property? Then they should pay for the property at current market rates. Protecting public access and public trust lands and recreational opportunities. I'm going to not share my screen for 2 seconds. You guys can keep on doing this. But I'm going to add an extra question as we're talking that I think it would be helpful to have. So I'm kind of doing a real-time effort here because I have the control of this, so I can do that. Let's see. But I like all these comments. Keep them coming. Gonna add one new slide right here. And we're going to do a similar open-ended one on this one, which is all right. That's going to happen in just a second. Okay, I'm going to go back to my presentation and share my screen. Awesome. Okay. Let's see, any other new ones here? Second on closing the lithium power plant, okay? And then let's see, keep up the great work. The CCLIP resiliency meetings and surveys were successful. Educating visitors to the need to protect the dunes, keep our beaches and clean and protect wildlife. Better control of pedestrian, bicycle, and automobile congestion. Got it. Okay. Recognizing that sea rise risks vary greatly along the coast. Yeah, I think that's something I can say that we are in fact thinking about that, and that's a really important one. Um, Keith Adams says, what would be the trigger or triggers in terms of sea level rise that would require the removal of shoreline protection? Would these triggers be specific for each area, or would they be the same for all areas? Great questions, Keith. We're in the process of helping to understand what the different triggers are. So that's going to be when we go to this next phase, we'll share those out and get feedback on those. But what I do believe is that those triggers will be for different areas along the coastline. So there will be some customization, because it is recognizing that we know things are different from different parts of the coast. All right. So I'm gonna go to this next slide. Oh, but what happened to my new slide? There we go. So I'm interested here because I think one of the things that we're trying to do, and I guess as part of our job, Alicia and I, as we're working on this, is to have a good conversation with all of you and to bring out, move towards a place where we can come to some good solutions. And I'm kind of curious, what are some of the things and ways that you would like to participate and be in conversation with us? Like, how do we connect each other and do this better? Obviously, this is one of the one element. I'd love to have any thoughts you have in terms of how we can have those conversations with you and then with each other too. I think bringing the community together to have these conversations would be helpful. So um, yeah, so we have a committee. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good. We do have a community working group that is very diverse, and it has representation from across the county. They are part of our process and really are keeping us on the straight and narrow through all of this. And they are vetting and trying to make sure that we're doing well. So thank you. That's important. Full transparency, great. Okay, who's the committee? David, do you want to just say really quickly as we're talking about this, like who's on, kind of just an overview of our committee?
Sure. I'm David Carlson. I'm the resource planner with the county, managing this grant-funded project. And we formed a community working group. It's got 17 members on it from a cross-section of the community: tourism, business, real estate, environmental, surfing. I don't have all the specific names for you, but we have members representing again, just a cross section of the community. So we're getting a good diversity of input and guidance on the project.
Yeah, thanks, David. And just to that point, so we have a couple things in place. We're doing a survey that should be coming out soon. Alicia, I know that you're saying it's coming out. I know we're coming out pretty quickly. So that's going out widely and broadly. We're going to have what's called a story map on the website that has a lot of the data and a lot of the information. Will be another place of sort of educational material. But I think it's also this, some of these things is, like having local neighborhood meetings. I think that sounds like something that we definitely want to do, kind of having those smaller conversations, continue to provide science that guides policy, continue outreach like Seacliff residential resilience efforts. Great. So I helped understand the concept of managed retreat was developed. I think that might be an entire meeting. I think managed retreat is something that is being used across California, Florida, everywhere, in terms of like that's one of the ways people are addressing that. I think I'm not going to try and say more, but that might be something that we offline we can share some conversation on if you want to tag us. Access to participate with the committee. We can talk about that. Are committee members advisory or actual voting members? They're advisory. That's how we've set it up. Reasonable time for adaptation, so existing shoreline investments can protect it in the midterm. We can definitely share the committee. I think it might even be on our website who's on our committee, but if not, we can definitely share that, I think. I don't think there's any problem to that. Make triple sure to engage those least likely to be involved. Thank you. Yes, we're working really hard to try and figure that out and make sure that happens. Transparency, yes, definitely. We're not at any conclusion on anything. We haven't made any decisions yet. We're all in the listening mode, Nothing has been even pen to paper on any of these things. We're still just understanding the issues and the concerns, and strategies and priorities are all in front of us to be made. So I think those are all on that. So that's all excellent. Um, Great. Well, I appreciate those different things. Give regular updates to the community at large, provide the public a schedule of what's happening. Great. Absolutely. Happy to do all of that. And a lot of that is on our website right now. So keeping that in. I do have a curious question, and if you can't add it, do you guys get information better from websites, from a newsletter, or from like the newspaper? I'd love to hear that. That would be a great thing to hear as well, because that's one thing when folks don't know how we get good information. And a meeting on manager retreat is a good idea. Okay, that sounds great. All right. Need to coordinate with adjacent cities. Yes, definitely doing that. So, and publicly to respond publicly to comments you receive. Great. Thank you on all of that. Okay, so and thanks on the open questions. Like I like that. Website has no information, so we can fill that out. I know that we're working on this. The story map is going to have a ton of information, so hold on, and you're going to get lots and lots. Newsletters and social media. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to take us to the next piece. I guess wait, where is it? There we go. Okay, this is hard, but it is something that we want to find commonality. And you just seeing what everybody loved in the very beginning and talking about why they love the coast. We want to think about in 20 years from now, which actually isn't that long, what do we want the coast to look like? And any thoughts here would be helpful. We're trying to figure out what that vision is, and so we can start to establish a vision as well as goals for this process. So love to hear some thoughts on that. I love the word cloud. It's accessible is front and center here. Neighborhood friendly, walkable, alive with wildlife, beauty, surfable, natural, protected. It's interesting, I think, when we think about this effort, this connection between protected and natural, right? That is where this tension lies with all of us. And I think they all have these huge values and we all want it all. So how do we do that? I think that's the central part of this process. Trash free, yes, that's nice. Kelp forests, equitable, disabled friendly, great. Natural armored bluffs, healthy, accessible seems to still be the number one in all of this. I can see if some more folks who are adding their ideas, so we can wait for that. Nice. Thank you, Barry. I got another accessible up on my Q&A. Clean. Yeah, I see someone has beaches up here. We didn't talk a lot. There's not a lot on beaches. I mean, obviously access is to the beaches and are part of that, but good to see that word up there. Awesome. So we have about 10 minutes left. And so I'm going to, I'm going to open up the floor to have any other sort of comments. We're recording so we can capture those. Just in as we want to listen to it. We're probably not going to have, we're not going to try to answer every question because I know sometimes that's a lot and it's kind of specific questions you can ask in the Q&A, but I just do want to open up the floor. Folks, anybody wants to sort of say anything. And it can be, on this vision about where we want to go. I think that would be very helpful. This sort of positively moving forward. Like, what is it that we can do through this process and through the conversations with all of you to kind of help us with this balancing act that is happening in local coastal programs. So if you're interested in saying anything, you can go ahead and raise your hand. There should be the mechanism on the bottom of everything. All right, Barry. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and allow you to talk. Hi, Barry. You're
Well,
on.
thanks so much. In a couple of my comments, I pointed this out. I had Scott Rolfe come to our Rio Del Mar Improvement Association's meeting on the 16th, just this month, and he provided a slideshow of the process of the swell direction slides, a lot of the science and data that's been collected, and it was just an eye opener for the our attendees. And everybody learned a great deal. And he shared too the results of their survey that they had conducted at the Seacliff Inn. The turnout for the events that they had were phenomenal. But it was I just want to give him and that effort a shout out for both engaging the public, gathering public input, and being able to explain some of the science and the dynamics behind what goes on with regards to, it's not just sea level rise, but the variable impacts at each beach. It's not the same everywhere, and so that's all I wanted to say. I don't know how well this working group is connected with that effort, but I just wanted to, and actually that would be a question if you have anything to say about how are you connected with the Seacliff and New Brighton State Beach study and public process.
David, if you want to answer that.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Barry. We are coordinating, and I've met with Scott and talked to him about their project. They're much further along with us, and I admire the work they've done and would seek to emulate that once we have our vulnerability assessment completed and our survey completed to do a similar presentation.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Barry. Mike. Hold on. Let me allow you to talk here, Mike. Up. There we go. All right. You're on.
How about that?
There you go.
So I just share the thought we should keep in mind, unfortunately, we're not starting with a fresh situation, right? Like where no houses are built, we could start at 200 or 500 feet inland. But we're victims of what happened, I believe, sort of in the 50s and 60s. In the 50s, in the coastal plains here, they piped creeks with 4-foot pipes during years of low water running. And then later on, huge water comes in, the pipes burst. There was a level of hubris with the development that we undertook in past decades. And we're dealing with that on the coast now with the recession of the cliffs. I think we have to at least consider that there are things that we cannot do to save some of these areas, even if we chose to. Nature is powerful, and big storms come along, absolutely. Even though it's a low probability per year, it's an absolute certainty over longer stretches of time. We have to keep in mind that we may have to adapt backwards because we can't hold back some things. That's my thought.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. Let's see. On the questions, it seems sea level rise is a major determinant for the LCP. You mentioned triggers, but then use projections based on protected sea levels, which you're going to use. So I think we have to think about the whole level of science here. I am not the technical gal, and in that scenario, so I'm not going to try to answer that too much. But we have to think both of those things. So we're going to figure out the triggers, but we have to have some sort of baseline where we're modeling and thinking about that. And David's going to answer an even better question on that, so that's good. Thank you on the Gary Griggs, appreciate that. All right, Darcy, let me go ahead and allow you to talk. Darcy, you're on. You need to unmute though, Darcy.
Thank you. I'm with the Surfrider Foundation, and we're looking for proactive planning, not short-sighted quick fixes like seawalls that make erosion worse and threaten our waves and our coastal ecosystems. We're looking for nature-based solutions like dune restoration, living shorelines and wetland buffers, especially in places like Seacliff, Moran Lake, and Twin Lakes. And we're also looking for adaptation incentives for relocation or elevation of structures rather than locking in armoring for future development. And just wanted to add those thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darcy. Appreciate that. All right. So anybody else? Okay, well then I'm gonna go here. Oh, Jeffrey Lamb. Hold on. Let me get you on. All right, Jeffrey, you're on.
Yes, just trying to wrap my head around your process here. And I assume you've done something like this before, and wondering if there are any kind of reports or similar kind of summary statements that have resulted from that, just so I can kind of try to gauge where the whole thing's going, or so that's my question.
Good question, Jeffrey. And we're really in the early stages of this. So we're developing right now what it's called a story map, which is sort of it's basically a website, has a lot of this detailed information, both on the technical side, and it's also, this is one of the many pieces we're doing of trying to collect community input. We're also doing a survey, as you can see, is up on the screen now. So that is all coming together, and we will summarize all that and share that out all with all of you so you can see what folks are saying. So this is one of 5 listening sessions we've had. We've had them kind of with like these different interest groups, with homeowners, with environmentalists, with other folks in the community. And then this is sort of as a public one. We're also doing the survey, we're doing stakeholder interviews, all of that will be pulled together and we'll share that out. Same with all the technical studies and the vulnerability assessment. Those will all be available, and that's going to happen really quickly. So I would say probably in the next, within the next month, if not sooner. And so the website, which is shown up here, and maybe Alicia, you can copy that and put that into the chat so people can access it a little easier. That'd be great. That will be where we'll be creating those links and sharing that out. And then finally, there's, knowing people might have other thoughts that are coming to mind that they want to share with us. If you use your phone again, you can use this QR code, and it's just a basic, simple, one big comment card that has an open text box. So you can provide comments, thoughts, anything on what we talked about today, what you're hoping we'll talk about in the future. It's pretty open for whatever is on your mind for that. So welcome to any more additional comments. And we really are interested in this process of hearing from folks and being as transparent as possible. That is our line. So there's nothing that we're trying to hide in all of this. We're going to be sharing out information at every step and having comments from the community at every step. That sort of process we showed that looked kind of like a wave is really this idea of this iteration, that we'll have community engagement that is informing and taking in your community comments at each step of the way. So we're going to do our best in all of this to be open and listening to all of you. So we really appreciate your time this evening. And this recording also will be made available. So if you want to share out, sorry, the first few minutes were not there, but all the conversation and everything else will be made available. The slides will be available. So again, you'll be able to see all of this. So thank you so much for sharing your evening with us. And we'll hopefully see you in person sometime in this process. Thanks. And I think I can cancel stop recording.